Just in, Donald Trump is asking the judge in his hush money case to delay his sentencing until after the election. Right now it's scheduled for September 18th. CNN's chief legal affairs correspondent Paula Reed joins us now. Paula.
Dana, this is another attempt by the Trump team to try to delay Trump's sentencing up in New York. Now, in this letter sent to the judge today, obtained by CNN, they're making two key arguments. The first is they are arguing that this sentencing could have an impact on the 2024 presidential race. They're also arguing that they're still appealing how that historic Supreme Court ruling on presidential immunity could apply to this conviction. Now, when it comes to that first argument about the election, they're trying to frame this case, this sentencing, as they have with all four of his criminal cases, as election interference. In this letter, they point to statements that the Democratic ticket has made about this case and the fact that this sentencing, right in the middle of September, will take place around the same time that early voting starts in some states. They say, quote, setting aside naked election interference objectives, there is no valid countervailing reason for the court to keep the current sentencing date on the calendar. There is no basis for continuing to rush. Now, Dana, there are legitimate, untested questions about just how close to a presidential election you can do things in a criminal case related to a presidential candidate. And I said those are untested because, look, we've just never been here before. But his team is also continuing to appeal this question of how the Supreme Court's ruling could impact this conviction. They argue that the Supreme Court ruling means that certain pieces of evidence that were introduced during this trial need to be thrown out. Anything that could be an official act, like, for example, they argue his conversations with Hope Hicks or things that he tweeted. Now, Dana, most legal experts do not believe they're going to be successful on that argument. But here, Todd Blanche, he says the judge in this case is going to decide if the Supreme Court case applies to this case on the 16th and then sentence Trump on the 18th. They believe that is not enough time to adequately exercise the former president's rights to appeal. So we'll see what the judge does here, Dana. A lot of really interesting legal questions being raised in this letter.
Okay, thank you so much, Paula. Appreciate that reporting. And Donald Trump scheduled another news conference for later today at his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey. It comes a day after he gave a campaign speech in North Carolina that was supposed to be focused on the issue Americans say they care most about, the economy.
They wanted to do a speech on the economy. A lot of people are very devastated by what's happened with inflation and all of the other things. So we're doing this as a intellectual speech. You're all intellectuals today. What happened to her laugh? I haven't heard that laugh in about a week. That's why they keep her off the stage. When Kamala lays out her fake economic plan this week, probably will be a copy of my plan because basically that's what she does. She is not a brilliant person. She is not a smart person. She is not very smart. But it is crazy, isn't it, though? Isn't it crazy? She was so disrespected just a few weeks ago, and now it's like, Kamala, Kamala.
And that was his policy event focused on the economy. It does seem each time Trump takes the stage, he hurls more insults at the vice president, all while Republican allies have been pleading with the former president to stay on message. Our panel is back, and we do have this new reporting, Kristen Holmes and I, that Corey Lewandowski, who was Donald Trump's very first campaign manager starting in 2015, first time he entered politics formally, was fired pretty early on in that cycle, but was really always in the Trump orbit for the past 8 years. He is going to be added to the Trump official campaign. We don't yet know what his role will be. He is going to be accompanied by other former Trump aides who are kind of coming back. They're getting a bit of the band back together. What does that tell you, Jonah Goldberg?
Well, one of two things. Either this is precursor to a larger campaign kind of shakeup, or a veteran campaign person told me recently, and I asked them about this, and they said it's also possible this is orchestrated by LaCivita and Wiles, where when a campaign's going bad and the candidate is down in the dumps, you got to bring someone that they can talk to. Basically, Corey Lewandowski might be like a service animal, like a comfort animal, to like for Trump to like vent to, who can travel with him so that they can, the campaign staff can actually run the thing. I don't. Either way, I don't think it bodes well for the campaign.
Well, on that note, it was noteworthy to me that Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita are the ones to put out the statement on the record that he is joining. Perhaps that's also a self-preservation thing to say, like, he's not replacing us. We're the ones welcoming him in. Maybe it is that. I mean, that they want to have somebody who Trump is comfortable with. I remember John McCain in 2008. They kept Joe Lieberman on the campaign with him. Like, what makes McCain happy? Joe Lieberman and cookies. So they made sure he had Joe Lieberman and cookies.
So it's interesting. I was talking to a Republican the other day about this, and they made a really interesting point that Donald Trump has not really had to run a campaign so far. It was, he kept being bolstered in the polls by people sympathetic to his indictments, this assassination attempt, that he was running against Joe Biden, which people were unsure if he could serve another 4 years. And so it wasn't a campaign. And now that he is against a campaign that is motivated, that has momentum, that is energetic, Donald Trump does not have the foundation at this point in his campaign to carry on with that. He doesn't really have a ground game in these battleground states. He hasn't really had a consistent message other than making fun of Joe Biden. And so I don't know it's up to them if Corey Lewandowski is the person to do that, but.
Right. Well, the ground game is one thing. That's an issue that the Republicans I talk to, I'm sure you do as well, say that they have to deal with. But on everything else, especially messaging, which is what we started this segment with, that's not a campaign issue. That's not a Susie Wiles or a Chris LaCivita issue.
I mean,
that's a Donald Trump issue.
And we've heard this every time he's run. And yes, he won in 2016, but he lost in 2020. And, every time there's been talk of Donald Trump as a changed person, he's going to be focused more on policy. He's changed because of the assassination attempt. It doesn't happen. It doesn't materialize. He's not able to stay focused. And I think, to Leanne's point, it's a lot worse for him right now because of the fact that he isn't sure how to run against Kamala Harris. He is so focused on still his talking points that he had, what was effective against Joe Biden, and pivoting now to her when he sees that a lot of the Democratic base is getting motivated by Harris at the top of the ticket, that one of his biggest arguments about Joe Biden being older than him and not necessarily running the country has totally been taken away from him. And he just has not been able to figure out how to effectively campaign against her.
The former president did talk some policy yesterday. It wasn't all insults. And one of the things that he talked about was Obamacare. Such a different world than it was back when he first started running for president 8 years ago. Listen.
I'm going to keep the Affordable Care Act unless we can do something much better. We'll keep it. It stinks. It's not good. If we can do something better, we're going to do something with it.
Yeah. Look, this is one of the problems that the Trump campaign is going to have, is that there are two different arguments you can make about Kamala Harris that have, I think, a lot of merit to them, but they're in conflict. One is that she is a deeply ideological, committed left-winger, right, a radical. And the other one is that she's a flip-flopper. Committed radicals don't flip-flop, right? Because flip-flopping suggests that you are willing to do what it takes to get elected, you're willing to run to the middle. The Trump campaign cannot go after her on the flip-flopping because there is not an issue left that Trump has not taken the exact opposite position on, from transgender to healthcare to almost every conceivable thing. And this is part of the reason why he's got to go back to the insult stuff.